U.S. President Donald Trump has set a June 1, 2026 deadline for what he calls a complete and total U.S. takeover of Greenland, escalating rhetoric that has sparked huge panic among America's European and NATO allies. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said the United States would sharply increase tariffs on Denmark and several European countries if no deal is reached by that date. Trump framed Greenland as critical to U.S. and global security, citing rising geopolitical competition with China and Russia.
Well, we're going to see NATO has been dealing with us on Greenland. We need Greenland for national security very badly. If we don't have it, we have a big hole in national security, especially when it comes to what we're doing in terms of the Golden Dome and all of the other things. We have a lot of investments in military. We have got the strongest military in the world, and it's only getting stronger. And you saw that with Venezuela. You saw that with the attack on Iran, with the knocking out their nuclear capability potentially. So, yeah, we're talking to NATO.
President Donald Trump said Saturday that he would charge a 10% import tax starting in February on goods from 8 European countries because of opposition to U.S. control of Greenland. He said in a social media post that Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland would face the tariff, which would be raised to 25% on June 1st if a deal is not in place for the complete and total purchase of Greenland by the United States. Trump said the United States has long subsidized Denmark and other European Union countries by not imposing tariffs and argued it is time for Denmark to give back. He claimed China and Russia seek influence over Greenland and asserted that only the United States can protect the territory. Trump said Denmark and 7 other European nations, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland have recently engaged with Greenland, calling the situation dangerous and unsustainable. Earlier, hundreds of people in Greenland's capital braved near-freezing temperatures, rain, and icy streets to march in a rally on Saturday in support of their own self-governance in the face of threats of an American takeover. The Greenlanders waved their red and white national flags and listened to traditional songs as they walked through Nuuk's small downtown. Some carried signs with messages like, "We shape our future," "Greenland is not for sale," and "Greenland is already great." They were joined by thousands of others in rallies across the Danish kingdom. The rallies occurred hours after a bipartisan U.S. congressional delegation in Copenhagen sought to reassure Denmark and Greenland of their support following U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to punish countries with tariffs if they don't back the administration's stance that the United States should take control of the strategic Arctic island.
So I don't think that sending a few soldiers to Greenland will change Trump's mind. What will change his mind is, I think, that something that really hurts him. And what he's vulnerable about is the economy, is money, is finance. So I think the EU is much more economically powerful than America, than the US. There's many more consumers, there's many more gross domestic product, so we can actually hurt the US a lot. And recently there's been a big treaty signed by Ursula von der Leyen on behalf of the European Commission because Trump was hustling his tariffs. And I think we should get back to that, which is to say, okay, it's going to be tough for us, but it's going to be more tough for US.
Pots and pans clash in the cold Amsterdam air. Outside the U.S. consulate, the sound is defiant, metal against metal, echoing a message that stretches far beyond the Netherlands. Keep Greenland free. Dozens of protesters gather, waving banners, crossing out images of U.S. President Donald Trump, and reading letters addressed directly to the people of Nuuk. Their warning is blunt. Greenland's future is not for sale, and Europe must not stay silent. They call it neo-colonialism, a new imperial reach into the Arctic. As NATO allies quietly dispatch troops to Greenland under Denmark's Arctic Endurance Initiative, just a few dozen soldiers, reconnaissance teams, a symbolic show of unity, activists argue it won't be enough, not against Trump. Soldiers won't change his mind, one protester says. Economic pressure will. The message is clear. If Washington understands tariffs, Europe should speak that language back. Protesters point to recent trade agreements and warn that the EU, united, has the economic muscle to hurt the United States more than it hurts itself.
I think it's very important that all governments make very clear that this attitude against Greenland is absolutely, we cannot tolerate that. It is neocolonialism, and it's absolutely far beyond what is respectful against another nation, another people, and it's also not the way we should treat nature. It is really beyond all borders.
So I don't think that sending a few soldiers to Greenland will change Trump's mind. What will change his mind is, I think, that something that really hurts him. And what he's vulnerable about is the economy, is money, is finance. So I think the EU is much more economically powerful than America, than the US. There's many more consumers, there's many more gross domestic product, so we can actually hurt the US a lot. And recently there's been a big treaty signed by Ursula von der Leyen on behalf of the European Commission, because Trump was hustling his tariffs. And I think we should get back to that, which is to say, okay, it's going to be tough for us, but it's going to be more tough for US. So I think then suddenly he will kind of rethink his whole policy, because he's only making more enemies, and he doesn't realize it, I think. He thinks himself he is great, and he's going to liberate the Greenland people, he's going to liberate blah, blah, blah. And so we should stop him where it hurts.
I think it's really unjust and really unfair, and it makes me very angry that the United States and Trump are illegally invading countries like Venezuela, and that now Greenland is also under attack. And I think that it's time that the European Union finally takes a stance, since it has been quiet so long in the past. I think it's time that the EU takes a stance and actually defends the countries that are now under attack by this fascist regime of America.
I think we see a new form, a new kind of imperialism, fascism. And I think the European Union has to speak out loud, more loudly than ever, because the world is on fire. So we have to act, we have to react. The more, the better. And I think that's the thing I want to say and to address to the whole world, especially the European Union. Please act hard, because Trump only understands hard words, hard fighting, and we have to fight back.
But even as chants rise in Amsterdam, the pressure escalates from Washington. Inside the White House, during a routine event on rural health care on Friday, President Donald Trump drops a bombshell. He suggests tariffs are like punishment for allies who refuse to back U.S. control of Greenland.
I called Germany. No, we will not do that. They said, no, we're going to put a 25% tariff, which is, by the way, about 7 times more than they would have to pay by raising their drug. Like 7 times. This wasn't like a little bit more, 7 times more. And I may do that for Greenland, too. I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security. So I may do that. I'll give you a little, I'll take you out of the, in fact, that'll end up being the story. But actually, this is a much bigger story, because we're reducing healthcare by numbers that you haven't seen. So I spoke to the top 10 countries. They all said no, and within about 2 minutes, they all agreed. And we were off to the races. And now we have favored nations. It's called most favored nations.
For months, Trump has insisted that anything short of Greenland being under U.S. control is unacceptable, framing the Arctic island as a national security necessity. Behind closed doors, Danish and Greenlandic foreign ministers met with Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio earlier this week. The talks lower temperatures, but not tensions.
A working group is announced, though Copenhagen and the White House offer sharply different explanations of what it actually means. Europe pushes back publicly, insisting Greenland's fate belongs to Greenland and Denmark alone. Meanwhile, NATO's footprint grows. Around 200 Allied personnel are already deployed. Denmark signals a larger, more permanent presence through 2026. On the streets, the message is louder than ever. Greenland is not a bargaining chip, not a tariff target, not an empire's prize. And as protests clash with presidential threats, one question hangs in the Arctic air. Will Europe draw a line or let Greenland become the front line of a new global power struggle?